Good afternoon. My name is Alla McCoy. I am Director of Startup Support at the University of Maryland's UM Ventures. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about a very interesting topic in the world of entrepreneurship, and it's a never-ending topic. It's how do you pitch investors? How do you create that pitch that captivates your audience? Well, first, before we begin on how, let's talk about who your audience is. Some of you probably already know this, but I'll go really briefly over who are angel investors and who are venture capitalists, as those are probably the most common investors that you'd be pitching. So angel investors usually are cashed out entrepreneurs. They're usually well-educated, either formal education or self-educated. You'll meet a lot of cashed out, very successful entrepreneurs who never completed college but are extraordinarily well-educated. It's not uncommon. Usually they have investment experience. They invest into companies that they understand. It's usually either the same industry that their own companies were in, or it could be something that they're very passionate about and would like to support businesses in that industry. And of course, they will do a lot of research and will have connections there. They usually invest close to home, usually within driving distance, and they invest their own money. They usually have money set aside from their successful cashed out ventures, and part of that money is usually set aside to invest in new startups. And they usually look for more than just an opportunity to put money in. They usually look for an opportunity to bring their own experience, their own network to the startup where they can make a difference in more way than just providing money. Now, venture capitalists invest other people's money. So that's one of the major differences. While angel investors invest their own money, VCs invest other people's money. And because they invest other people's money, they usually have lower risk tolerance. And they usually, because of that, they usually invest at a later stage in the company. So usually your investment lineup comes, angel investors come in first, followed by venture capitalists. Typically, a venture capitalist will take a board seat or more, depending on how much money they're investing in the company. And because they are very involved, they take a board seat in the company. They limit their own investments to 5 to 8, so they will not invest in a whole lot of companies because at any given time, because it's difficult to then follow those companies and be an active and effective board member. And then the next question, you have to consider whether or not your startup, your business is actually a good fit for a venture investment. First, some of the questions, philosophical questions, you have to ask yourself. Are you willing to give up ownership and control of your company? You're willing to give up equity, because that's what investors get in return for cash. They get equity in your company. Are you willing to take advice from investors and actually listen and maybe change direction of the company if needed? Are you willing to accept the board of director decisions? So board of directors have control over CEO. So really important to consider. Are you willing to have somebody as a CEO? Are you willing to give somebody control over your actions within the company? And also, are you willing to plan an exit strategy? Basically, are you willing to sell your company in the next 3 to 7 years or 10 years or so? Because that's how investors make money. So they will only invest in a company where there is a planned exit strategy when the company is sold. And then the next set of questions are, is this a fast growth startup? Meaning, are you going to be able to produce significant revenues in the next 3 to 7 or 10 years, depending on the industry? And thus, will you be able to produce a significant return for investors? Typically, venture investors look somewhere between 8 to 15x return on the investment, because this is such a risky business. So if they make 10 investments, usually about 1 or 2 of them are successful, and those 1 or 2 need to pay for all of the ones that failed. And that's why their model only works if there is a potential for significant revenue at the exit. Now, does anybody have any questions? I think that was a good natural time to pause. If anybody has any questions, I can answer them, or we can keep going and talk at the end. Okay, I don't see any questions, so why don't we move on to, so what makes a good pitch? As with any presentation, whether investor pitch or whether you teach in the classroom or doing any other presentation, telling a story is always a good idea. So when you're presenting your company, you have to tell a story in an organized way. Show passion. You need to show that you started this company because there's some sort of reason why you're doing this. You are passionate about that. Obviously, you have to sell your idea. Keys to a good deck, deck meaning the PowerPoint presentation. And we'll talk more about it. And I'm actually trying to have somebody do specifically a workshop on how to make a good PowerPoint presentation. So watch for that in the fall. But as generally, don't put a whole lot of words on your deck. So use words only as illustration. And the reasoning is as soon as people start reading your deck, they stop listening to you. So they either listen to you or they read your deck and you want them to listen to you. So use words as only as illustration, use graphics, and don't forget branding. So meaning put the logo of your company on every page to brand yourself and make sure that the investors or whoever is watching your presentation remember your name and remember your logo. The purpose of your initial pitch to investors, you usually get about 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes. And it's usually to generate interest in your startup. It's usually, so if your goal is to have a bunch of men and women coming to you at the end, giving you their business cards, taking your executive summary and telling you, hey, why don't we go grab a cup of coffee and talk more about this? I'm interested, or send me more materials, or tell me more. So that first initial investor pitch, it's not where you make marriage proposal. This is where you are trying to get a coffee date with your investor, or possibly. And tell me more is the best outcome of the pitch. And when you're talking about your technology, your idea, talk about what you do and why, and not necessarily how. You want them to ask questions about the how, or want to ask questions about the how. And just to follow up, so don't go into extraordinary details. Obviously, do provide details about how your business will operate or operates already, but don't go into minutia. It's not a science presentation, so don't talk about science behind your technology and no matter how fantastic it is and how it's a breakthrough technology. Just explain what it does, not necessarily how it works. And for the how it works, you can give some details, and then you can, you can schedule follow-up sessions on really, really detailed explanation of how it works. At this stage, investors assume that the technology that you're presenting works. So they believe you that it works. You don't have to convince them. So this is also not an opportunity to close the deal. As I mentioned before, it's nobody's going to write a check after the initial pitch. So don't feel disappointed, and don't feel like you didn't accomplish anything. This is an opportunity to hopefully generate interest and schedule a follow-up. So don't do that. So the right time, when is the right time to approach angel investors in our area? So Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, we are different from the West Coast, and investors here usually, angel investors invest at a later stage than say out in the West Coast. So they're looking for technology that's at least in the MVP stage developed or near completion to be developed. They're looking for companies that have existing customers or users. It could be maybe not paying customers. It could be users who are willing to convert into customers. And they are willing to buy and pay for your product and service. They will ask you how much of your own money you've invested into the company. So it's important to have skin in the game, because if you have not invested any of your own money and you're asking others to put their money into your company, that doesn't inspire a whole lot of confidence. So they will ask you how much money you've put in, your own money you put into your company, also including friends and family. They're looking for startups that have a business model, some sort of proof of a business model that it works, that there is demand, that and an idea of how to scale that model. And obviously, there are always exceptions. There's always, there could be that one angel that is very passionate about something, and they'd be willing to fund the company much earlier than this. So now we will talk about how to create a pitch, how to structure your pitch. This is just a suggested outline. It works in most cases, but obviously depending on what type of story you are trying to tell, you can rearrange and tell it slightly different. But these are the basic components and the general order that you would talk about. So first you would talk about the problem. So what is the problem that you're trying to solve? And generally problems divide into a vitamin type of problem or an aspirin type of problem. So a vitamin type of problem will improve an aspect of your life. So, some of you probably do take daily vitamin, and some of you, and we feel better about that, and it probably makes our life better. However, if you have a headache, you will take an aspirin or any other pain medication that you're taking. So if you have an aspirin type of problem, it's something that's really, really painful, and it has to have, customers have to have your solution. And so, so talk about what type of problem that you're solving. And then you would discuss who has that problem. So who is your market? Problem or need or want. So who is in your market? Where are they located? And if there are multiple markets, multiple market segments, which one of those has the biggest need, and which one of them is the easiest to enter. So what's really important here is to talk about your total addressable market. So out of the entire available market, how many customers would you actually be able to market to? How many customers are you going to be able to reach? So if you are, for example, a restaurant that serves sushi, your total market are all the people who like sushi and are able to afford your price point. However, your addressable market are only people within the driving distance of your restaurants who actually can become your customers. Now, a serviceable obtainable market is what is the percentage of your TAM, a total addressable market, that you think you actually will be able to capture. And that's what's going to dictate your financial projections, and very important. Just check and see if we have any questions. Don't see any. So next you would talk about your solution. So you talked about your problem, who has the problem, the market, and then what is your solution? So how are you going to solve the problem or address the need? Talk about it in a possibly in as little jargon as possible. And if you have any IP rights, you should mention it here. So you could say something like, we have patent pending technology that does XYZ. The exception here, of course, if this is a business-to-business solution and you are selling to another business, to another person in another company who is very technical and it is important for them, they understand your jargon and they actually want to hear those details. So in that case, or if you're talking to investor audience who really understand this, and all of them do, and they really want to hear that. So then that's the only time when you would spend more time on the details behind your science, how your science works, and detailed IP rights. For the IP rights, if you have patent protection, just mention we have issued patent, a patent pending, or several of them, and the geography. And you can also mention that you are planning to use, or you've applied for trademarks, or you received trademarks and such. So very brief. Then you would talk about who else offers this type, who else offers solutions to the problem or addresses the need. So basically your competition. Well, first of all, never say that you don't have competitors, because you always do. Humanity has been around for a while, and so most of the problems have some sort of solutions. Not all solutions are good, but they do exist. So don't forget about indirect competition. So always talk about do deep dive into your competition. It's really important for investors to see that you understand who your competitors are and how is your solution better, cheaper, and faster. And the way to present, so there are two ways you could present your competitor analysis. So first, one way, if your solution has two very prominent features that are very important to customers, so you could create this graph with two of the important features on the axis. So here, example is accurate and fast. So a solution is accurate and fast. And usually your competitors, your name, you could put logos here. I put competitor 1, 2, 3, 4, but you can put your logo or your competitors' logos here and just show how competitor 1's solution, for example, is slow and not very accurate. Competitor 2 is fast but not very accurate. Competitor 4 is very accurate but slow, but you can do it fast and accurate. and it's a really good graphical representation of where you stand with regards to your competition. What's really important is that the features that you choose for these two axes have to be the two most important features for customers. Another way to present, if you can't pick just two features, you can create a table. I hope you can see this. Well, you can pick a table where you list multiple features, could be more than 5, and competitors. In the first column, again, you can use logos of your competitors or names. Logos are usually better visually. And then your startup could be either at the bottom or at the top. So your competitors will have some of the features, but you will have all of the boxes checked. And that's how you can show your competitive advantage. And again, the features that you pick have to be important for customers, and the investors have to understand that those are really important features. So then you would talk about your business model. How would you build, deliver, and provide customer service your product, or your service to the customers? A really good way to look at business model, this is one of the ways, is to use the business model canvas method. That looks at 9 different business components of a business model. So you would discuss about how would you price your product, what's the cost structure, what's the sales, marketing, where are you going to manufacture it, what are your distribution channels and such. So this is, and we actually have a workshop coming up discussing various business models using the business model canvas. So if you're interested in that, that workshop is scheduled for, I believe, end of the month. Then you would talk about what's your go-to-market strategy. So how are you going to launch your product in the market? So first, what's your beachhead market? And beachhead market means what is the market segment that has the biggest need and the easiest to enter? Basically, which market are you going to address first? The biggest need is a good criteria, but may not be the one to consider the most. It could be what is the easiest to enter because you would need, it would be the cheapest, for example, or you wouldn't need as many resources and you can enter it really fast. And then use proceeds from that money, from that market to enter your next. You have to focus on one specific market. You can't go initially after 5 different or 3 different markets. Usually investors will immediately lose interest if you talk about going after several different markets at the same time. You have to be focused and you have to have really good understanding of how you will go about getting into that market and other market segments for future expansion. So one example of this, we have a company called Blue Labs, and they have technology. They've discovered that a substance called methylene blue has a very strong antioxidant effect on skin. And the application for this technology, one of the original markets, and this research was done to actually cure or help relieve the effects of progeria, which is a disease where children age prematurely. However, to make or create and sell a pharmaceutical, a drug, is an extraordinarily expensive and long journey. While, even though that's the biggest need. And so entrepreneurs, the scientists and the entrepreneur decided first to focus on the anti-aging skincare market, where the need isn't as severe, but however, it's easy to enter. They don't need to have FDA approval process, and it was fairly easy for them to start making and selling the skincare line. They launched it on Amazon store platform, so it was all really easy for them to launch. Still required a lot of work, so don't get me wrong, but it's much easier and faster and cheaper than a drug. So now that they're growing their skincare market, that can potentially in the future also finance part of the possibly drug startup that will take this technology to market and will help patients with progeria. But that's an example of which market has the biggest need and which one is easiest to enter, and how do we make the decision which market to pursue. Now, an important part of your presentation or your pitch should be financial projections. Usually the easiest to show in an EBITDA table, where you would show, 5 to 7 year projections. I have an example here for 5-year projections, and also in my example, I have here number of units sold. That may not necessarily apply to you. So it could be just sales, expenses, and net. And basically, whenever you are presenting these numbers, you have to be able to substantiate. So your business model has to support that. So say in year 1, you're just ramping up, you're still doing R&D, finishing developing, so you're planning no sales. Year 2, you're planning to sell 100 units. How are you going to do that? Who's going to sell those 100 units? Is it possible? So understanding the sales cycle of your product is really important. Are you going to have enough salespeople? So who's going to be doing the selling? So you have to be able, are you going to be able to manufacture those 100 units and then ramp up your manufacturing to 21,000 units in year 5? How are you going to do that? And such. So you have to be able to prepare to answer those questions, and also understand that, whatever numbers you present here, the investors will slash in significantly, probably 50% or so. But you have to be able to show a compelling picture where they will look at this and say, well, okay, so this has potential for a fast growth and has potential for a good return on investment for me, so that they would be enticed to learn more and possibly invest in the company. One of the most important components of your pitch deck or your pitch presentation is talking about your team. Obviously, who is on your team, who comprises your team, why you and your team are qualified. So everybody who's on your team has to be there because they bring certain expertise to the startup that's really, really needed, and they fulfill a very key role. And also what motivates them. So this really early startup team has to be driven by more than money, because there's not a whole lot of money this early, and there's a lot of work. And there will be a lot of not just ups, but lots of downs. And is this team motivated enough to get through the downs? And obviously, you as the CEO is the most important person here, or whoever the co-founders are. So talking about qualifications and what motivates you, why you are all passionate about this is really important. And the last but not least, you would talk about your ask. So how much money do you need? Usually investors don't like seeing a range. You need to have a good understanding of how much money do you need and what are you going to do with it. And importantly, what milestones is this money will allow you to achieve. You know, $1 million will allow you to launch your product and enter the market with a real product. So that's a real milestone. Or it will allow you to expand your product line, or something that's really important. And do you need anything else in addition to money? So you can ask for money, but you can also ask for expertise. You can ask for introduction to customers. There could be somebody in the room who won't be able, who doesn't have capacity to write you a check, but they might be able to introduce you to important customers or important partners. So that's always a good idea to ask for. And so the key takeaways, you should always present your startup with obviously investor perspective in mind, and put yourself in the investor's shoe. So imagine that somebody else is asking you to invest in your company, and what would you like to see in that? Only talk about the addressable market that you actually can reach possibly and potentially service. It's really important to present a scalable business model and a big opportunity, and talk about what your unfair advantages are. Could be IP protection, could be unique skills within the company, could be unique geography, but you have to talk about what is your unfair advantage, not just fair. Business stage is very important. So what stage your business is in. As I mentioned before at the beginning of this presentation, venture capitalists have lower risk tolerance. So they might look at you and see that, yes, this is potentially scalable business model, very attractive potential market size and such, but you're just way too early. So that's important. And as I mentioned before, strength of management team is very, very important. And again, show your passion and talk about why this startup is important to you and why you would persevere even when things don't go well. Some of the next steps for so if you're a University of Maryland faculty or grad student, if you would like to create a pitch, following pitch deck, and you can follow the outline presented here, you can, and then you can come get in touch with our entrepreneurs in residence and get coaching. They're very happy to coach people and have done so successfully. If you would like, it's always really useful to actually to attend to observe real investor pitches. And some of you, if you don't know, at the Damon Center for Entrepreneurship at the Business School, there's an actual angel investor group that meets every month. It's called Damon Center Angels. They meet monthly and they watch investor pitches from 3 or 4 regional startups. They aren't necessarily University of Maryland startups, but any startup in the area can apply to pitch to them. And it's a very fantastic and unique opportunity for you to go and observe those pitches, and not only the pitches, but also when entrepreneurs leave the room, you can hear the kind of discussions that investors have behind their backs, which is really interesting. So it's very interesting to see what type of information is presented, how it's presented, what kind of questions they get, and what kind of reaction from the investors they get. And those are, it's a very active in the angel group. They usually invest in, I think this year they are closing 7 or 8 deals. So they're very active, they write checks and they invest in real companies. So you have a unique opportunity to attend and watch that. If you're interested in either working with our entrepreneurs in residence and or observant Dingman Center Angel pitch, please send me an email and I will schedule an opportunity for you to do so. Dingman Center Angels will not be meeting, they already had their June meeting. They will not be meeting in July and August. They will be back in September. However, entrepreneurs and residents will be available throughout the summer. So if you're interested, please let me know. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for everybody who logged in and stayed. And now I'd like to open the floor to questions if there are any. And you can either submit it via the Q&A or raise your hand digitally and I will be able to unmute your microphone. Yeah, somebody asked if I will email the deck. Yes, I will. I'll email the deck and I will also post a link to the recording of this workshop in a few days. And at this point, I can go ahead and stop the recording.